Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching the Today I Found Out YouTube channel, and in the video today we're looking at World War II and the creator of Captain America. Jack Kirby was one of the principal minds and artists behind some of the best-known comic characters in history, including, among many others, the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, X-Men, and Captain America. Few people realize, though, that like his most patriotic creation, Kirby spent a good portion of World War II fighting the Nazis as well, though never managing to duplicate Captain America's feat of punching Hitler in the face. Kirby was drafted into the army in June of 1943, just as his comic career was starting to gain some serious traction, and he was initially assigned to be trained as a mechanic. However, according to Kirby's son Neil, his father had absolutely no affinity for the finer points of mechanics and spent as much of his training as possible lying below a truck and occasionally smacking it with a wrench so that it sounded like he was doing something worth doing. In a rare set of interviews given by Kirby in the early 1990s, he revealed that one of the most surprising things about basic training, other than the difficulty of training itself in those days, was the culture shock of meeting so many people from so many different backgrounds that he previously knew very little about. He said, "There were very limited communications. A telephone was very hard to come by, not like today. To own an automobile, you had to be semi-rich, and nobody ever took a cab. Those were taken by rich people too. And airplanes? We all took trains back then, and you only went on a train when you really had to go someplace." One anecdote Kirby remembered fondly was the time he introduced himself to a Texan as a Brooklyn native, and the Texan asked him, "What's a Brooklyn?" Likewise, Kirby also expressed shock at hearing a southern accent for the first time, formerly believing that the accent was simply a product of Hollywood that must have been exaggerated in some way. He stated of this, "In that particular way, I think the war did a lot for uniting America. It was a galvanizing experience. It united the states because it forced people to work and live in close quarters with each other. It forced us to meet each other on common terms." After his basic training, Kirby was shipped off to what was then known as Burma, known as Myanmar today, where he was given training in how to become an anti-aircraft gunner. Training for this included a live fire practice where a gunner crew was asked to shoot at banners and flags hung several hundred feet behind a friendly tow plane. It is noted that Kirby's anti-aircraft crew was so bad at this that they shot down their own friendly plane, causing the pilot to have to bail out. Unsurprisingly, Kirby was soon relocated to an infantry division in Eastern Europe, where he joined the 11th Infantry Regiment. During his time with the 11th Infantry, Kirby and his fellow soldiers were subjected to no less than 36 separate assaults from the German army while trying to hold a small section of wood bordering the Moselle River in the north of France. One particularly notable assault attempt included a large tank that smashed through the regiment's defensive line. It was then only stopped by an unnamed soldier who managed to shoot through the driver's viewing slit, killing him instantly and potentially saving the life of Kirby. Kirby was only feet away from the treads of the tank in a foxhole. During another firefight, Kirby got an odd, seemingly crazy order from another soldier. He later recounted the story. "Once during a fight, some guy crawled up to me from the back and he grabbed my feet. I almost shot his head off. He said to me, 'Pick out 5 men and go see Marlene Dietrich.' I was at the end of this rock wall and chunks of it were flying around from 88 shells. The earth around me was going up in big clots, all the rest was being pounded by machine guns, and I was laying there talking to this big jerk. This guy said, 'If you don't want the detail, then I'll get another guy.' I said, 'All right, I'll take the detail.' I still didn't believe this guy, but I picked out 5 other guys. They thought I was crazy too, and they came along with me. We crawled about 100 yards and walked another 400 where there was a truck waiting and other GIs were getting on. So these other guys and me got on this truck, and they took us about 7 miles down the road away from the action. And sure enough, there she was, Marlene Dietrich, along with Bing Crosby, Martha Ray, and some other actors. They put on a show for us: comedy, vaudeville act, singing, dancing, all that, in this hell on earth. I couldn't believe it, the guys with me couldn't believe it, our jaws must have dropped and hit the ground. After a while, I wasn't even thinking about the frigging war. At one time, Marlene Dietrich came out in GI underwear, and it was crazy as all hell. Meanwhile, the Germans had deepened their defense, and some of the fire reached this little theater they had set up. A shell hit not far away. I felt the concussion, and we all expected to be called back to the action, but the show went on. Bombs fell closer, and gunfire got clearer, and all the while these actors kept the show going as if nothing else mattered. It was a real morale booster for us. It upped my respect for these performers immensely, for all performers everywhere. They were really what they said they were, real troopers. There they were, right up near the line. I mean, how far is 7 miles? They took the risk almost as much as the soldiers did. Kirby's position while serving in the regiment was that of a scout, regarded as one of the most dangerous jobs a soldier could have. His basic duties involved sneaking ahead into unknown territory and drawing maps for the Allies to use. Kirby would later recall of all this: "If somebody wanted to kill you, they made you a scout." So the question might be now, how did he get this unenviable gig? Well, according to Kirby, he became a scout shortly after a lieutenant learned his last name and asked if he was the Jack Kirby. Kirby enthusiastically responded, "Yes, sir, I drew Captain America," believing that the lieutenant probably just wanted his portrait drawn or something similar. Instead, the lieutenant, now knowing about Kirby's artistic abilities, made him a scout, telling him, "You go into these towns that we don't have and see if there's anybody there. Draw maps and pictures of what you see and come back and tell us if you find anything." During one scouting mission, Kirby recalled that he was startled by a rustling noise, only to find it was just a dog. It was a great big hound that was badly injured. It was cut and burned all over. It stopped in front of me and just stared. It didn't growl or whimper, it just looked at me with these deep, accusing eyes. It was the most human expression I've ever seen on an animal. It was like he was saying, "You did this to me." Oh, I felt so guilty. I felt just terrible and so hurt, because to me, it was like an accusation by a dumb creature that didn't care why I was there or anything about the Germans. All he knew was that I was there and he was hurting. That's all this animal knew. All this was happening around him, and even though I had nothing to do with it, I'm still the cause. I didn't have the courage to look this beast in the eyes any longer. I lowered my rifle and it limped past me out of the wreckage and onto the road. He kept giving me these dirty looks. Terrible, dirty looks. I think I stood there for several more minutes before I continued my sweep. On another occasion, he got into a firefight with a German soldier who'd made fun of his mother. Most Americans have an image of war, especially that war, that it was a carefully planned event. Groups of men, groups of professional fighting men going up against other professional soldiers, moving in columns, aiming their rifles, all under the orders of their commanding officers. Well, let me say that guys are guys no matter what the circumstances may be, and different rules apply. We called each other names all the time. We were cursing each other in English, German, French, Hebrew. I had quite a large vocabulary by the time I got back. I could cuss somebody out in 4 different languages. Sometimes a shot was never fired, but we'd still be yelling at each other to go to hell or go shit on yourself. But you never said anybody about somebody's mother, not unless you wanted somebody to take a potshot at you. And that's exactly what he did. I entered a street, and somebody from a window started calling me all kinds of names in German, and he was laughing. "I'm going to kill you," he said. "I'm going to shoot you right in the face." I stepped back against the wall and pulled back the bolt on my machine gun. I was ready to wait this guy out, but then he said something about my mother. I forget what, but it gets me pissed. I mean, really pissed. So I stood back and began spraying where this voice had been calling. Then he started spraying me, and soon the whole street is riddled with bullets. I guess there was more than one guy because I could hear them running through the buildings. We all ran like hell, but I never saw these guys. I think I hit 2 of them, but I didn't stick around to count. I ran like crazy. The whole place was filled up with flying stuff. There's also a persistent rumor that Kirby ambushed 3 German soldiers and killed them all with a knife, but Kirby himself never confirmed this story in any of the interviews he gave about his time in the war, nor could we find any well-documented evidence to support the rumor, so the veracity of the tale is somewhat questionable. Kirby's military service, well, it finally came to an end when he got frostbite on both of his feet during an unforgiving European winter. Don't think I just got nippity-ippity frozen, they were frozen. It took them a year to even get back some of the original color. After spending this year recovering and barely avoiding having his feet amputated, Kirby, he was sent home. Funny enough, Kirby missed the transport ship meant to take him home in a mere 3-day journey because he got a cold. As a result, he had to return to the States in a lumbering hospital tugboat. To add insult to injury, he noted that he mostly starved on the 9-day trip back, suffering from intense seasickness that made it almost impossible to keep any food down. Though he did not complain. Many men lost limbs, some lost part of their faces. I saw guys with half a face, one you could look inside part of his head, and I saw a lot of guys who were scarred deeply in other ways. Listen, I was doing alright compared to most of the other guys. He went on to say, "There is nothing that you would call romantic about war. Sure, in the movies and on television they paint a great picture of the fellowship that it creates. I've seen war bring lots of people together, but I can tell you that the cost is extremely high. Not just in terms of lives, but in the human spirit. I think that we are diminished by war. Our character as a race is somewhat reduced by each war that we allow to happen. Hitler had to be destroyed. There was no choice, and I was glad to do my duty. But if there were another way to bring him down, I would have preferred it." After returning to the States, Kirby picked up his career where it had left off and went on to become one of the most prolific comic creators in history. As famed comic book artist Gil Kane noted of Kirby, Jack was the single most influential figure in the turnaround in Marvel's fortunes from the time he rejoined the company. It wasn't merely that Jack conceived most of the characters that are being done, but Jack's point of view and philosophy of drawing became the governing philosophy of the entire publishing company, and beyond the publishing company, of the entire field. Marvel took Jack and used him as a primer. They would get artists, and they taught them the ABCs, which amounted to learning Jack Kirby. Jack was like the Holy Scripture, and they simply had to follow him without deviation. That's what was told to me. It was how they taught everyone to reconcile all those opposing attitudes to one single master point of view. And now for some bonus facts. The image of Captain America punching Hitler in the face actually received hundreds of complaints from Nazi sympathizers upon its release. At the time the comic was published, in 1941, the full extent of what Hitler was planning and was responsible for wasn't yet widely known. The threats against the staff were so numerous that a police guard was set up outside their office building, and the mayor of New York personally called to reassure them that the city of New York would see no harm come to them. Apparently, he was a big fan. And now for another bonus fact. In 1979, Jack Kirby teamed up with the CIA and the makeup artist from Planet of the Apes as part of something known as the Canadian Caper. In a nutshell, Kirby was asked to create a bunch of concept art for a non-existent sci-fi movie called Argo, which was used as cover to rescue some hostages. This story was later adapted into the Oscar-winning, albeit wildly inaccurate film starring Ben Affleck. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, if you would like to support us with what we're doing here at Today I Found Out, making these daily videos, please do consider becoming a patron of this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/TodayIFoundOut, link on the screen as well as in the description below, and we've got a bunch of cool perks for people who do that, so please go check it out. And as always, thank you for watching.